And often I've found that when we ask God for help, He sends the people that love us to answer those prayers.
Christ is so simple. His arithmetic is a child can comprehend it.
At the end of the day, I think people generally want to say yes. We want to help people accomplish their goals, but most people stop themselves. Like, we're our own worst enemy.
Hello and welcome to Latter-day Profiles. I'm Brian Howard. We're here at the LDS Motion Picture Studio in Provo, Utah, and joining me today is Dana LeCheminant. I got it spelled right?
You did.
I grew up with neighbors that were LeCheminants, so I make sure I got that right. She's an author, has lots of books, over a dozen. I was reading one last night, which was a lot of fun. So good to have you here with us. Let's jump right into it.
All right.
How did you get into writing? What was your interest?
Oh, I've always loved telling stories and reading, and so I wrote little stories when I was a kid. And then I think it was in fourth grade, my class, we all wrote a book, and then they kind of bound them hard covered for us to make them cool. And then the library actually made a copy of mine, and that was the first time I was like, oh, I think I wrote something good. And so I just never stopped after that.
Yeah. Were you an avid reader growing up? Was that
Always,
something you got into?
yes.
What was your favorite? What was your genre?
Oh, I mean, I really got into fantasy with Harry Potter because I was about 11 when I read the first one, so that really started that kick there.
So your first published book was in grade school then,
Yes.
into the library. Yeah, that's an awesome. Did you continue? Did you do stuff through high school, the college? What kind of stuff did you do?
I mean, I was always writing, working on something. I was telling stories with friends. And then when I went into college, I decided to go into English creative writing. To do that, just because it was what I loved to do, so I just kept pursuing that.
Now we had something in common. I went to Southern Utah, but it was several years before you did.
Yeah.
What made you decide to go down to Cedar City?
Yeah, I mean, my brother went to school there, but when all of the schools came to my high school to do their little presentations and try to recruit students, that was the school that felt right for me.
So down there, you were studying writing down
Yes.
there as well. What was your thought as far as career-wise? What kind of things you wanted to do? What was your goal?
I mean, I really wanted to do editing, probably write on the side, but I never wanted that to be my career choice. And so when I graduated, I started editing, just doing freelance work with clients that I could find. And then my books kind of took over all of my time. And so I wanted to work on them versus somebody else's stuff. So
Sure.
It kind of pulled my attention that direction.
That's intriguing. Tell me about editing, because, for me personally, the creative process is not the editing, but without it, so that's not true. But what do you
Right.
like? What drew you to that? What do you like about editing?
I mean, I really love words and just the play of language and being able to tell a sentence so many different ways, just depending on where you put punctuation and the word choice and all of that, and just really telling something the right way with the right words.
It seems like always something that's a little bit difficult because you are working with people, you're editing other people's stuff, and it can be a little touchy at times. How does that go when you're saying, well, maybe this is better? How's that play back and forth?
I mean, I always try to make suggestions versus directions. Just maybe if you try this or offer a couple of different choices, where just kind of give them an idea of where they can go with it, and just point out why I think it should change. But I always say, if you don't want to make that change, you don't have to, because this is your work.
What was your impetus to actually start writing your own stuff? So you're doing this freelance. Did it just one day, I'm going to do this? Did you make a plan, or was it just, I'm going to start writing some stuff?
I mean, it built over time, just because I'd written so many things. I think I'd finished about 20 different books before I ever considered, I should publish one of these. But I was working in the publishing department at Deseret Book as an intern, and I was helping judge the Whitney Awards while I was doing that. And I came across one book that I just loved. It was by Heather Frost. And I was reading her bio just because I loved the book so much. And I realized she and I were the same age. And I was like, oh, she can do it, I can do it. And so that kind of started me on that process.
Oh, okay. So what was the first book you did? What genre did you go for? What was the first one out of the gate?
It was romance.
Okay. So tell me about that. Why choose that one? What was that the genre for you?
I mean, I've always had to put romance into any story that I've told. And that one, I'd originally written it in high school, and I rewrote it.
Oh, wow.
Just in a completely different, turned it contemporary versus kind of medieval romance is what it was at first. And it felt like my story that I had to tell. Maybe not the best book for people to start with, but for me, it was a good place to start.
So did you, there's so many places to publish now, and so self-publishing is always a good option, right?
Yes.
But also like Covenant and other publishers. Did you go that route to begin with?
Yeah, I started self-publishing, but it was only a few months later that I looked into Covenant Communications because I loved all of the books that they were putting out. And so I submitted to them, got accepted, and so now I'm kind of hybrid between the two.
Oh, okay. Now, let's talk about that self-publishing thing, because what process did you go through? You put it on Amazon. How did you do it, and what's that process like? Is it pretty easy, or is it?
It's gotten even simpler over the years since I started. Yeah, so I did it through Amazon first, just because there's 0 upload fees, and it's really nice and really easy to start from there. I tried putting it wide for a little bit, and that didn't feel right for that book, so I moved it back just because they have their Kindle Unlimited feature, which is their subscription, and so you get paid per page read. And doing that, it just gives people a chance to discover new authors.
Interesting. So with that, did you notice once you uploaded it, was it encouraging, discouraging? Because then you can actually see ping, somebody download it, somebody buy it.
Right. I mean, it started really slow for me. Some people, they upload their first book and it just shoots off viral, but mine, it was really slow building. I think it was around book 12 where it kind of started to really get some attention.
Interesting. So you took it to Covenant. You were familiar with the folks because you'd done an internship there. What was that experience like, trying to present, kind of basically sell your book and say, hey, this is something you might consider?
I mean, I actually got really lucky because I knew one of the editors there, and so I kind of got to sort of skip the submission process that most people go through, which, I mean, I don't know if I would have really been accepted if I hadn't made that skip. Hopefully I would have, but...
We'll say you would have, yeah.
Yeah, let's say it was good enough. It was really nice to I sent it in, and then I had to wait a couple of months. It was a long waiting period, and then I got a message from that editor saying, hey, we're going to take your book, and it was probably the best day of my life.
So when you're self-publishing, then you might get a freelancer to edit it for you. Now when you go through a company like Covenant, then what was that process like? Now it's different. You got another set of eyes, at least many eyes probably on your project.
Yeah, so there's an evaluations crew that they send out to people, and so that's the first step in the submission process, and they kind of give feedback to the writing committee, and then they have a new products committee, and it was a whole thing. There were a lot of people who were looking at that book before it ever got accepted, and then the editor takes it, does their edits, and then you take it from there, make revisions, send it back, and they have a proofreader, copy editor, and there's just a whole lot of people working on it.
Yeah. How's the experience like? Because you'd been freelance editing, to have somebody else editing your stuff, was that okay? Was that interchange? Were you more empathetic because of that, or how was that experience for you?
It was actually really interesting just because she had very different changes than what I would have made, but that was because it was my writing versus somebody else's writing, where a different person sees different things from the creator of the work. And so I learned a lot from her just with that first book, and just seeing the things that I commonly did, and I think it's improved my writing a lot just having that editor there.
So ebooks are fun, Kindle books, but it's kind of cool when you actually get a physical copy. Tell me about that. First book comes out, it's actually on a shelf, or you get sent it to you, it's got your name on it. What was that like for you?
Oh, it was the best feeling in the world. I don't even know if I can describe it, how it feels. I mean, with my self-published books, I just ordered myself a copy, and it was just really cool to hold it in my hand. But seeing it on a shelf with that first Covenant book was like the coolest thing, just walking into a Siegel book and just there's my book, it's on the shelf. It was a weird feeling. And then seeing it in a library especially, I was like, oh, somebody actually asked for this book and somebody wants that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Tempted to take a selfie with the book on the shelf, right?
Yes.
Hey,
I've done that, for sure.
So let's talk about the genre. So, again, at least a dozen books. Do you know exactly the number you've written?
I think I have 18 published. 18, okay. I've written way more than that. But.
Yeah, okay. So, as you're, going through this process, you've done multiple types of genres. So, the romance first, and then you've done some. The one that I was checking out was one with the Wonder Boys, which is kind of a rom-com kind of thing.
Yep.
How do you decide, does this idea, I would like to write this genre? Do you look for what's kind of popular? How do you do it?
It's a little bit of both. Mostly it's whichever character is talking the loudest.
Okay.
Because everybody wants their story told, and it's just whoever kind of is really speaking to me the most, and that's whose story I work on.
So let's talk about your process then. So how do you go about it? I've heard so many different ways. Some people basically lock themselves in a room. I got to write something. Some people are like, aha, it came from heaven. What happens for you? How do you do it?
It depends on the book, but most of the time it's usually there's a character talking to me. and I'll start with whatever scene that they want to start in, and they'll just start talking to me, and I'll start writing it down, and then from there I just write whenever I possibly can. I work full time, so it's in between like lunch breaks and right after work and before I go to bed, sometimes through the middle of the night because they won't shut up. And I'll just write as much as I can, and then once there's stories on a page, I can know where to fix it and all of that.
Yeah, tell me about writing dialogues. I always think that's interesting. Getting the words to make it sound like this is what someone says. Is it something you pour over a lot, or think, or like the natural? Because it's, as I read through yours, it was pretty natural dialogue. Sometimes I would never say that. Of course, maybe I wouldn't, but somebody else would.
Right.
How do you do that?
I mean, for me, I almost always write the dialogue first. If I'm outlining a book, which happens about half the time, I'll just write the scene with just dialogue. I just know what they're talking about and what the conversation is that they're having, and so it feels a lot more natural for me when I do it that way, but just because it's two people talking, there's nothing interrupting them, and then I'll fill in the details after that. And I usually end up reading my books out loud to make sure that it sounds right, because sometimes on the page it looks fine, and then you say it out loud and you're like, oh, that's weird.
Tell me about this rom-com series. So do you take some experience from personal life for some of the characters in the books? Like, oh, this is an experience for me, change the name to protect the innocent kind of thing. How does that work?
Sometimes it depends on the character, and like with the Wonder Boys, there is one of the characters, one of the boys is very similar to one of my best friends. I mean, she's a girl, he's a guy, but like a lot of her traits I put into this character just because I love her to death. And it really made him such a dynamic character just because there was so much reality to him.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, rom-coms especially, well, they're popular Hallmark movies, right?
You're right.
Yeah, a lot of popularity. But the whole, dating scene is interesting. I've been out of that for a long time, but how does that enter into your books and, social life? And you have to inform me because, I haven't been involved in that for quite some time. But tell me about that.
I mean, it's really fun to take personal experiences as I'm out there dating, taking either dates I've been on or dates that my friends are going on, and taking their experiences or like things that people have said or just situations and putting that into a story, because then it's like, hey, that's a real thing, guys. And sometimes they get pretty ridiculous, but it's how it goes.
Sometimes reality is stranger than fiction,
Exactly.
as they say, right?
Yes.
So this series you're doing now, the Wonder Boys. Tell me, that one, is that the most recent one? Or
Yes.
What's the most recent? And so that one you got, I think, 4 books.
Yeah, there are 4 out.
Are you doing some more? What's a feature?
I'm working on a spin-off series to it. I'm taking some of the characters from the 4th book and telling their stories. It's pretty fun so far.
Okay, sounds good. Is that Love in Sun City? Is that
Yes.
the one? So is that going to be multiple books? Is that
Yeah, I'm planning 4 and a novella.
One of the things I would struggle with, I think, as you're weaving your story is remember who did what when. Do you have a plan laid out? Do you kind of map it out, or are you just writing as you go?
I usually just write as I go. I can usually remember the details pretty well. With this series, though, especially, all 4 books overlap each other, and so they share scenes and timelines, and so I had to make sure I was writing down. I have a calendar where things happen, just because I had to make sure that if this happened in this book, it correlated with what was happening in this book, and it was a lot more work than I usually do, because usually they're chronological, but this one, they're all on top of each other.
On top of each other, keeping track of everybody. I tell you about, I've noticed the writing community for Covenant or the LDS authors in here in Utah, there seems to be a pretty collaborative group. Tell me about that, working with others. What's your interaction been?
Oh, I've interacted with so many authors, especially here in Utah. There's a lot of us, like you said, and just doing events with them and collaborating. When I first got accepted by Covenant, there was another author who was accepted around the same time, and I sent her a message. I was like, hey, tell me what's going on, because she was a little ahead of me in the process. And through that, we became really good friends. And through her, I met other people. And it's amazing how much we all support each other. Like, you'd think it would be a more competitive kind of market just because there are only so many readers in the world, but the nice thing about readers is they keep reading. And so it's really easy to support each other and just make it a really warm, welcoming community.
What kind of support do you get? Is it actually feedback on your books itself? Is it advice? What kind of things do you share?
All of the above. I mean, we'll beta read each other's books. We'll post about it on social media. We'll show up to each other's events. Just all sorts of things. Just whatever we can do to help each other is kind of what we do.
Now, tell me about, promotion. That's always interesting, because a lot of times you like to write the books, but going out there and actually talking to people is a different story.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
What's it been like for you to go to events or book signs and things like that? And what's the feedback you get from folks who come?
I mean, it's always so fun to meet readers. It was kind of a surreal experience the first time I did it because there were people who knew who I was and I didn't know who they were, and I've never experienced that before. But it was really cool to just meet people that I'd seen online and interacted with and just meet them in person, and just being able to acknowledge each other and like thank them personally for reading the books, or see that light in their eyes when you say something about your book that like, oh, I want to read that. And I had one author recently at a signing. She was another author there, and she told me that the Wonder Boys series inspired her series, and it just like made my day, just because it was like the most amazing feeling where like I helped somebody take that step, just like that Heather helped me take that step back in the day.
Yeah, it's interesting. People do keep reading. So you finish one book, you're going to read another, right? Especially the avid readers. So I guess the competitive would be a little bit less, even though you'd think we're still competing for the same
Right.
audience. But it sounds like it really is a collaborative affair with all the folks.
Yeah, it's really nice.
What's the role does social media play? I know for you, I've like on your Instagram, you got snippets from your book and things like that. How do you decide what to put there and go with social media? What role does it play in what you do?
I mean, for me, social media is my entire marketing. Just because I don't understand Amazon ads yet, I haven't figured that part. So everything I do is through Instagram, and I found some really incredible readers. I found some of my beta readers through Instagram, and just being able to I do so many teasers. That's almost exclusively what I post lately, just because I like getting people to want to read the books that are coming. But just interacting with people online it's so fun.
It's instant feedback, isn't it? Which can be good or bad, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Probably mostly positive experience, I hope. Right?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah. How do you come up with like the teasers? On some of them, you got snippets from the book. How do you decide what to do? And have you got like a content marketing plan? I mean, how do you go about it? I mean, you kind of have to wear multiple hats when you're doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, for me, when I'm writing the books, if I come across, like I write a line, I'm like, oh, I like that line. I'll save it and then use that later. Or I'll have, my alpha or beta readers pick out lines that they really like, and I'll use those. But mostly it's me just picking out things that I think are entertaining and just sharing those.
Yeah. How do you pick those folks? Are these just folks they ask you if they can, or do you? Oh, I noticed that you're following me a lot. How do you do that to find trustworthy people? I guess,
I've done it a couple of different ways. I mean, there are a few I've reached out to just because they've read every single one of my books, so I know they're gonna like them, and I know that they're gonna have thoughts about it. And then I've done like signups if people want to learn how to beta read. I've done that. And then people have approached me and been like, hey, if you need a beta reader. So it's a little bit of everything.
You've probably done, as you've done these events and others, so many people like to write, of course. It's a dream, a goal for some people. What kind of advice do you give when somebody comes to you now? Because you're a published author, right? And you got stuff out there, and that's a pretty cool thing. What do you share?
I tell people if they want to write a book, just to write it, to finish it. Don't go back, don't nitpick over the words. Just from start to finish, write that book. As soon as you have it on the page, you can fix it. But if you have a blank page, you can't fix that.
So you've been working another job in addition to that, but you're going to take that leap to do full time. Is that kind of scary? Tell me about that decision.
Oh, it's terrifying. Thinking of writing full time it's really scary. Just knowing that it's a subjective career where if readers don't like what I'm doing, they're not going to buy my books. But I think if I can really devote some time to it, I'm hoping it'll work out well for me.
Yeah, the business side of things is interesting, as you're considering it. It's not just the creative side, if you write it, they will come. You also have to do the marketing thing. How much time and effort do you put into that? Do you rely a lot more on like Covenant other folks to do that? Or is the social media really the way you do it?
Right now it's all social media. Hopefully I'll have a little more time in the near future to do more outside of that. But so far social media has been working pretty well for me.
Do you have any new genres you're considering? So you've done the romance, you've done the rom-com. Anything else? You sound like you've written a lot more books that are out there. So what are some of the other things you've played around with?
I mean, I've had some like sci-fi and fantasy ideas that I've been working through. Just haven't had as much time to work on them. And the rom-coms are so much fun that it's hard to stop those to work on something else. But I'm hoping that in the near future I can kind of branch out a little bit and kind of do those not darker, but like heavier genres a little bit.
Yeah, how's it working with a company like Covenant, and it's definitely church sponsored, right? What's that relationship like, and especially gospel oriented kind of thing? What's that relationship like? Clearly the books aren't church oriented, like anything, but they're all clean and have good themes to them. What's the bill for that?
It's nice knowing that whatever they produce is going to be really good and really clean and appeal to any audience. You can give it to your teenage kids because you're not going to be afraid of content there, and knowing that anything that they produce is good.
Dana, it's been a pleasure to talk with you. I look forward to it. The next book you've got coming out is Love in Sun City, and that's coming out sometime
Sometime soon.
So look for it. And you can check out her website as well. Just do a Google search and also find author bio on the Desert Book and all those things out there. So check them out. It's been a lot of fun to chat with you. I wish you all the best
Thank you.
in your new endeavors.
Thank you so much. It's been great.
You bet.